Welcome to another episode of Two Old Geeks Talking. Now on the World Wide Web.
Hey, welcome back to Two Old Geeks Talking. I'm Rob.
I'm Trace.
And today we're discussing
incredible comic book stories.
Okay,
so I know that title probably confused you.
what you explained it to me is it's kind of like Ripley's Believe It or Not kind of stuff.
Yeah. So whether you like comic books or not, you'll enjoy this video because they are incredible stories.
Now, are we talking like people like characters or storylines?
You'll see. Just hold on.
Okay, but I might want to throw some shit in there too.
Well, you can. So, all right. So, remember we grew up with shows like That's Incredible. Mm-hmm. You know, you had those three hosts, and they'd show you little clips of things across the world. And I liked those shows, but I really liked Ripley's Believe It or Not.
Okay, yeah.
Especially when it was hosted by Jack Palance. You know, I just love that guy because he's just so over the top. I mean, they talk about William Shatner being over the top in his acting. With Jack, if William Shatner's here, I mean, when Jack Palance talks, he sounds like he's jerking off on a treadmill.
Yeah, but he took it serious.
No, but he's like,
it was kind of a crap show, but he was like into it.
Like, today we're going to talk about incredible comic book stories. Believe it or not. Yeah. So anyway, the first, I got 8 stories.
Was creepy as fuck.
Yes, it was. So I got 8 stories for you. So the first, some of you may have heard of, but some of you may not have. Have you ever heard of the Angry Girlfriend variant? Okay, well, let me tell you.
Okay.
I'll tell them too. So there was a young man by the name of Chance Bartle. This is back in 1990. Do you realize 1990 was 35 years ago?
Yeah, that's hard to believe.
Yeah, we owed. But anyway, he was the victim of some unprovoked vandalism. His mint condition, Amazing Spider-Man, number 14, which is worth $8,000 today, was vandalized by a girlfriend. Now, first of all, do you know why that comic is so sought after?
No,
you're not a Marvel guy.
What issue?
14, Amazing Spider-Man.
No,
It's the first appearance of Green Goblin.
Oh, okay.
So his girlfriend got mad at him. So she took a Sharpie and on the front of the comic wrote, "Go to hell." And then on the back of the comic, she wrote, like, "I guess I could be noble about this, but I'm not going to," and blah, blah, blah.
Like
wrote this thing. So basically took his Holy Grail comic, and totally destroyed it. So the story become viral on the internet. And the comic is actually called the Angry Girl variant. And so somebody took it to CGC and had it graded with the Sharpie marks all over and everything. And so a lot of comic book store owners wanted it. So it's changed hands several times. And they'll take it to cons and have it on display. And people will have their picture taken holding the Angry Girl variant.
That's sad.
Yeah. But anyway, I had a friend of mine, a friend of yours too, Frank. And when he was younger, you know, his mother thought his comics was evil, and she destroyed a bunch of them.
Right.
But yeah, to key a man's car or to mark up his Amazing Spider-Man 14. I mean, come on, ladies.
So we're not talking about amazing stories within the comic books themselves. It's just in the comic book world.
Yes, you're getting the hang of it. I'm sure by the end of the video, you'll understand completely.
Okay, because at first I thought you were going to tell me some crazy stories that happened within comics.
No.
Okay.
So the next story, Nicolas Cage's stolen comic. Have you heard about it?
Yes, I think I had. Yeah. He actually bought it back when it was...
Yeah, what it was he had a party. Nicolas Cage had a party. You and I wasn't invited. Okay? And so he had a party, and he had a comic stolen at the party. And not just any comic, an Action Comic #1. Now, so you're a DC guy, so tell me what's so important about Action Comics #1.
Is that Superman, right?
Yeah, first appearance of Superman. So it was worth about $1 million when it was stolen. But he found it, or it was found 11 years later in a storage locker in Southern California. So a guy named Don Herrick, who is the head of the LA art theft department. I don't think we have an art theft department here in Frankfort, Kentucky.
I don't think we have that much art in Kentucky.
But anyway, he'd been working the case since like 2000 when it was originally stolen. Now Nick was smart and he had it insured.
Right.
Which brings up another point, is that if you've got a large collection of important comics, it's a good idea to have insurance on that.
Right.
So he had his comic stolen. He was able to recoup the value of it, which is a good thing. But a guy named Balio had been asked to sell it, and he recognized it as Nicolas Cage's comic. Now, how would you recognize it as Nicolas Cage's comic?
I would say watermarks, any little nicks or tears, because I don't think, unless that was before barcodes, so it wouldn't be a serial number.
You can't. I mean, comic like art, is like a fingerprint, and so like a comic, like you said, every little tear, every little crease,
right,
all that's marked. Now, I'm pretty sure that Nicolas Cage had this graded. And so when you get your comic graded, you actually have a unique serial number.
Okay.
So that was one reason they tracked it down. I believe that's the case. But the fact is, there's only 75 copies of Action Comics #1 that even exist. And his was a 9.0. You know how many 9.0s exist?
Just one.
Two.
Two
of them. So he gave $150K for it, which is quite a bit of money to sell out for a comic, but it was worth $1 million when it was stolen. But when he got it back, he turned around and sold it for $2 million.
Wow.
And so, and that comic today is worth $9 million. So keep your comics insured. So let's talk about an incredible garage sale find that was done last year. Now, when you and I were young men, young boys, and we would go to garage sales or yard sales or flea markets, it was possible to come across a really nice comic because it was pre-internet.
Right.
It's hard to believe, but yes, it was pre-internet. And so people might put something out and they really didn't know what they had. And so now, like we've been comic book vendors before Comic Cons, and I've seen people come up and they would see something we had for sale and they would look it up to see if we were selling it for the right price or if they could get it cheaper online to see if we were being fair. So now to find a good comic or a great comic or a fantastic comic that somebody doesn't know about is near impossible.
Right.
Because most people know what they've got. And then I'm not just talking about comics. I mean, any kind of collectible. It's easy to look up and see what it's worth. So a guy went to a garage sale and he found a Detective Comics #14. Now, what's so important about that?
I can't tell you right offhand.
Oh, it's the first appearance of Batman.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, first appearance of Batman. And that comic come out in 1939. Now, he found it and it was in rough shape. It was in rough shape. He actually had it graded. And they grade comics now from 1 to 10 with decimal points thrown in between. And his was graded as a 0.5. So, I mean, that's about as low as you can get. That's almost toilet paper. But even in that shape, that 1939 first appearance of Batman was worth $150,000.
Right.
Even in a 0.5. That's crazy.
Because there's very few of them that exist.
So you can find a good deal at a yard sale or a comic.
Yeah, you just got to wait for one of us to die.
Or garage sale or something like that. So it can happen. But so I want to ask you a question. So if you're at a garage sale, you're thumbing through there, you come across Detective Comics #14.
Is this pre-internet?
No. This is like last year.
Oh, just last year?
Yeah. So you come across a $150,000 comic, and she's got a buck. It's a comic book, $1 a piece. So do you say, ma'am?
No.
Do you got a $150,000 comic in this box, or do you just give her $1 and just take off running down the street?
Yeah, it's exactly what I would do.
And that's what I would do, and here's why. To me, it's the seller's responsibility to know what they're selling.
Well,
and it's the buyer's responsibility. So in other words, let's say you got a comic for sale, and let's say you got it marked up 4 times its amount. If I buy that and get taken advantage of, whose fault is that?
Look, you're looking at it wrong. Here's the way I see it. Nothing is right or wrong. It is only thinking that makes it so.
Gosh.
So, nothing has value except for what value we put on it. To her, that comic book was $1.50. She was happy to get it out of her place.
Yeah.
Like people get pissed at these artists that go out and buy paintings from Goodwill and then paint over top of them. It was only worth $4 to somebody, and that's what they sold it at Goodwill. So the fact that he turned around and sold it for $500 because he
Yeah.
painted something on it. So did he do her dirty? No, he gave her exactly what she wanted.
I agree with you for a totally different reason.
Okay.
I mean, to me, if you go to sell something, it's the seller's responsibility to know what's worth. And if you go to buy something, it's the buyer's responsibility to know what's worth. That way the seller doesn't sell something too cheap. And that way the buyer doesn't overpay for something.
But we're not talking professional sellers, though. This is a
No.
woman who was selling garage crap, and it was probably her
Well, when we
sons
went,
or
yes,
late
but
husbands.
whenever
or-
we had it, when we were vendors at a comic convention, did you not look up everything you sold to see what it was worth, and then put the appropriate price on it?
No, I was nice. I cut it in half.
I usually cut it in half too, but I didn't cut it in fourths or
No.
tenths, you know. But anyway, okay.
Okay.
So another amazing comic book store is a comic book story. Another incredible story is a comic book that was found in an attic.
Okay.
Now, first of all, do you know why a comic book would be found in an attic?
Because someone did not decided not to put it in the basement.
No, back in the old days, people used newspapers as
As
insulation.
insulation, right?
I mean, that was back at the time where you were like.
Now, if you said in a wall, I would have said insulation.
Yeah, lots of times people use use newspapers. Back then, they were getting newspapers almost every day,
Right.
and they were cheap. And newspapers and cardboard make fantastic insulation.
Right.
Ask any homeless guy who's living in a cardboard box. So they make good insulation. So people would take their newspapers and cardboard and old comics and old magazines, and they would stack them up in the attic, or like you said, put them in the wall. And
Right.
even sometimes poor people would use wallpaper paste and actually use newspapers to wallpaper their walls
Right.
as a form of insulation, and it makes great insulation. So a lot of these older homes, that's what you find when you get up there. Well, there was a David Gonzalez, 34 years old. He was a construction worker back in 2013 in Minnesota, and he bought this house to flip it. So he bought this house he bought it cheap, old house, going to do a little work on it, and then sell it for a higher amount.
Right.
So that's a real popular thing to do. A lot of people do it. So while he's up there going through some newspapers in the attic, he finds an Action Comic #1.
Nice.
You know, first appearance of Superman. Been there since, been there for 70 years. It come out in 1938. So he's super excited about it. So he's showing his wife's aunt who's helping them remodel this house.
Okay.
So as she's looking at it, she's sitting there looking at it. Sometimes she'll go turn the page and the page will rip when she turns the page. Or she'll turn the page and a piece of the newspaper print will flake off.
Okay.
And so he sees that she's doing damage to the comic, so he goes to snatch it from her, and she tries to hold on to it and tears the back cover. Okay? So the comic sold for $175,000 as it was. But that one rip was a $75,000 rip. So they could have easily got $250 for it if the back cover wasn't ripped. But having said that, $175,000 was more than he gave for the house.
Right.
So he already recouped his money for the house before he did the remodeling on it, and so anyway, they had it graded, and it was a 1.5 after the rip. So let's talk about some CGC scams, some CGC bad employees. So you know what CGC is, right?
Is that the company that grades your
comic.
books?
CGC stands for Collector Graded Comics.
Right.
And so most of you know what that is, but for those of you that don't, back in the day, if he was selling a comic that says mint condition, and I said it wasn't, I say it was a near mint, he's won a certain amount for it, I want cheaper. And so we're arguing back and forth. I'm trying to get him to go down, he's trying to get me to come up, and it's a matter of opinion as to what condition the comic is. You have your opinion, I have my opinion, just like real life. Well, CGC He said, hey, guys, let me step in between you.
Yeah.
I'll grade the comic.
Yeah.
I'll seal it in plastic, so whatever I grade it as, that's what it will stay as. And now you don't have to argue with him. If I say it's a 9.0 or a 6.5, then that's what it is. It was a fantastic, brilliant business model.
Right.
And so they've made a ton of money doing it. But anytime you're making big money, anytime you got money in anything, there's always corruption.
Sure.
So what happened is that there was an employee named Brandis Terrasas, and he tampered with over 300 comics. And so what he would do is, let's say you sent in a comic that was a 9. There was a 9. So what he would do is he would set that 9 aside, and then he would take an 8.5 and put in there. Same comic. So the difference between an 8.5 and a 9
is not a lot.
Not a lot at all.
But
what he would do, a lot of collectors like a comic, once it gets up to a 9 or higher, the price of it, the value of it really goes sky high. So he would take that 9, so he bought the 8.5 and put it in there. He would take the 9 and then sell it. Have it graded, he would grade it and then sell it, and he was making quite a bit of profit. And so, but what you don't realize is just like that Nicolas Cage comic, that's like a fingerprint.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a collector would get that back and he'd look at that and he'd say,
he'd look at
that comic and he'd say, yeah, that's creased there and that's faded there. This isn't the comic I sent in.
Right.
You know, and and the dude was selling stuff online underneath his own name. So he's a CGC employee selling graded comics online. You know, talk about a red flag.
Right.
So anyway, I mean, one of the things he did, he took a Hulk 181, which you got.
Right.
Why is that important?
Oh, it's because it's the first appearance of Wolverine.
Yeah, it was an 8.5, and he slipped in a 9.0. And to be honest with you, most people wouldn't even pay attention to it. So CGC had to come out and admit that had happened, because it was where there's smoke, there's fire. A lot of collectors noticed it.
Right.
And so they give refunds and try to get it all straightened out, which is what a good company does. So CGC also, back in Philadelphia, just last year, they got sued by Matt and Emily Myers. And what Matt and Emily Myers did is they did comic book restorations. So if you say... So they were expert in document restoration.
Right.
So you sent a super expensive comic to them, and they would restore it. And so there was an employee that worked at CGC called Nelson, and he went online saying that implying that they wasn't doing true restorations and that they were just doing photocopies. That they were taking pages out and just photocopying a page and putting it in there, not really restoring it. Which was a total lie, and they sued CGC and got $10 million from that lawsuit, from that defamation lawsuit. So shame on him. So, next comic book story. Incredible comic book story.
Okay.
Comic written in blood.
Kiss?
Yeah.
Yeah, you believe that crap?
Yes, I know.
I got some property, waterfront property in Florida.
Let me tell you, because first of all, they're actually seeing pictures right now of Kiss getting their blood drawn. And with Stan Lee dumping it in there. So, back in the day, 1977, go back in time if you can. So we're back in time, 1977. Kiss is having their first comic book coming out by Marvel.
Right.
One of them had an idea to take their blood, all the band members' blood, and put in the red ink. Can you name all the 4 band members? How good are you?
I know George. Shit.
George, that's Beatles.
You got Ace Frehley.
That's one. Ding, ding, ding.
Gene Simmons.
Ding, ding, ding.
And that's all I know.
Oh, you got Peter Criss and Paul Stanley.
Okay.
So all those guys, they had a notary public there, Robert. They took photographs. They drew their blood, just a vial of blood, each one of them, and they dumped it over in the red ink. And so when you bought the comic, their blood was actually in the red ink.
So you're saying, without 100% doubt, that this was not some kind of promotional stunt?
Without a doubt, it was a promotional stunt. These are guys that paint their faces and blow fire and spit blood and of course it was promotional. That's all Kiss is about.
Yeah, right.
You talk about merchandising. They got Kiss everything.
Because
They probably got Kiss bowler hats.
I actually held one of those comic books that was supposed to be written in blood.
Yeah, it's not 100% written. They dump their blood in this giant vat of red ink. So it's not like it's 100% blood, Robert. But anyway, that's a true story.
They're short.
Believe it
Or not.
or not. So let's talk about the very first variant comic.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of Mark Jewelers?
No. I'm going to say no.
Okay.
Sounds familiar, but I'm going to say
It probably
no.
sounds familiar because you're a comic book collector. So way back in 1970s, when they would make comics, they would send a few to specialty shops because there
Okay.
wasn't a ton of comic book stores. And it was most of it would go to your drugstores, and they'd be on spinner racks, or
Right.
grocery stores, and sitting on racks. And so they would send a portion of the comics to military bases. And the reason they did is because GIs were and are huge readers of comics. You can just take it and throw it in your backpack, and wherever you're at, you can pull it out and read it. So a lot of those young men then and those young men now love comic books. And so there was this company called Mark Jewelers that sold rings, wedding rings primarily.
Okay.
And since a lot of young military guys would buy wedding rings, what they would do is they would have an insert inside the comic. And so to find a comic with that Mark Jewelers insert in it is rare because they sold them to military bases at the commissary. These GIs would buy them and read them, and they'd throw it to some other guy, and he'd read it, and he'd get done, he'd throw it to some other guy, and then somebody would throw it in the trash.
Right.
They wouldn't walk around with long boxes on their shoulders and bazookas on their other shoulder.
Right.
So hardly any of those survived. So to give you some idea, a Moon Knight 32, which is the first, Werewolf by Night 32, which is the first appearance of Moon Knight, sold recently for $975. But a Mark Jeweler version of Moon Knight sold for $1,975. So more than twice, because he just had that insert in it. And hardly any of those survived because, like I said, GIs trashed them. So really that's one of the first, if not the first, variant comic book out there. Don't you feel smart?
Now, was it cause? Would it really be a variant, or did it just have an adverse in it?
No, it was a variant because it was different than a variant means different than everything
I
else.
thought variant meant it had a different cover.
Well, that's what it means now. But we're talking in the 1970s.
Oh, okay.
And so, it's different.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. All right. So, and then if you go to buy comics online, they'll have like the comic, and then below it, they'll have the Mark Jewelers variant. And you'll pay more for the Mark Jewelers variant. So, last story, brother. Okay, the comic book burnings. You remember the comic book burnings?
Nope.
So, of course not. It's just a little bit before your time. 1940s.
I wasn't invited.
1940s. And the 1940s is when the anti-comic hysteria hit an all-time high. So you had youth groups, churches, and schools, and they had determined that all their delinquency and all their kids' problems were coming from comic books. So they would have these huge bonfires. They would build them, and everybody would throw their comics. And there was no comic safe. I mean, even Archie. Who could ever say there was anything bad in Archie? Even Archie comics got burned. So that was back in the 40s, and it really was a precursor to the whole government getting into the comic books with the Comic Code Authority, which we won't get into. But I remember as a kid, first of all, I'm a Christian and I'm conservative, so I can talk bad about Christians and conservatives because I am one.
I'm not one, and I can still talk about
Yes,
it.
that's true. That's true. But the thing is that like I can remember as a kid, preacher getting up in the pulpit and saying, if you KISS means kids in Satan's service,
right?
And if you listen to the Eagles, they got that one song, Hotel California, and that's a devil worship there. And then they say, if you're playing Dungeons and Dragons, that's demon worship. Well, there I was sitting in a pew, and I was a big fan of KISS, and I was a big fan of the Eagles. I was playing Dungeons and Dragons, and I was like, but I mean, that still goes on today. Like I've heard them say stuff bad about Pokemon and Matt Walsh, who's a guy I really like. He's made a couple of movies. He's made What Is a Woman and Am I Racist, which are very, very good movies. And they're like documentaries. And even he the other day come out and said, manga, to me, there's just something about manga that's intrinsically demonic. So he doesn't know crap about manga. Probably never read one in his entire life.
Right.
But he's seen a few pictures of it, and so he all of a sudden makes that statement. So, but you see it all the time. Kids are violent because of violent video games.
Or music.
Yes.
Or vapes.
But here's the thing. Don't talk bad about something if you don't know anything about it. Second of all, yes, there are some there are some comics and video games that aren't appropriate to kids. But don't talk bad about something when you know absolutely squat about it. And here's a hard pill to swallow. We'll close. Here's a hard pill to swallow.
I got a story to tell you.
Okay,
Go ahead.
all right. Here's a hard pill to swallow. If your kids are bad, it doesn't have anything to do with video games or comic books. It has to do with you being a bad parent. That's what it has to do with. So stop blaming it on other stuff. Suck it up, take responsibility. So what do you want to say, brother?
Okay, so Ben's, we're talking about odd stories and comic books.
Yes. You got one.
I got one.
Oh, awesome.
So back in 2000, I know that was 25 years ago.
Oh, you make me feel old.
Yeah, right. I don't know if you were into Wizard magazine.
Yeah, I loved it.
Oh, I loved Wizard magazine.
Yeah.
It was like the magazine for geeks.
Got one laying over there somewhere.
Right. So in issue 104, Wizard came out with this big story. Now they were in Strange Bedfellows with Marvel at the time.
Yeah.
And so they had came up with a story saying that there was a character that predated Silver Age comics that Stan Lee had created, and that he created it with this gentleman. They showed a picture of this gentleman in this military suit.
Yeah.
It was Photoshop. It was all a lie.
Oh, yeah.
Marvel put Wizard up to do it. Wizard was okay with it. It wasn't even an April Fool's thing.
Yeah.
They literally, and everybody, Wizard was the bomb.
Yeah.
Everybody trusted Wizard back then. And
so what was the goal?
so the goal was for Marvel to create a character. They went back and added him to a bunch of Silver Age stories.
Yeah.
His name's the Sentry.
Yeah, I remember the Sentry.
Well, the Sentry never existed
had a big S on his
until
chest.
the year 2000. They made all that crap up and had people believe that he was a Silver Age comic book. He had an S on his belt.
Yeah. Was it Silver Age or Golden Age?
No,
is his 40s or Silver's is typically 70s.
Yeah, I think it might have been before. It was supposed to be way back when.
Yeah.
But yeah, they came up with this big lie and everybody swallowed it. Everybody was like, oh my gosh. And we've even got Stan Lee's original artwork, which they just whipped up and pulled out of their butt.
Yeah.
So, and to this day, a lot of people don't know that the Sentry was based on a lie from Marvel and Wizard.
Yeah, because he's still a popular character.
Yeah.
And he's still around.
He's still around.
He's still around. That's interesting. I didn't know that.
You learn something new every day.
Do you have any more incredible stories?
Not stories that pertain to the comic book, outside the comic book world.
Okay. All right,
inside comic book stories.
You done, brother?
I'm done, brother.
All right. I'm done too. All right. I appreciate you watching. Please hit that like and subscribe button and that notification bell.
Ding, ding.
And appreciate you watching, and stay geeky, my friends. So we are done.
Done!
We're done.
Done.
Congratulations. We're done.
Done.
We're done.
We're done.
We are done.
We're done.
Believe it or not. You try to do Jack Plants.
He would kind of talk. He reminded me kind of like a really bad. Who's the guy from Twilight Zone? Believe it or not.
Oh, you mean